Welcome to Aspire Johnson County's podcast, the Johnson County Business Insider, where you will hear storytelling and interviews spotlighting the people, projects, and policies driving Johnson County, Indiana's growth. From this, you will gain insights into business, workforce, public policy, and community development around Johnson County. We're excited to share that the Johnson County Business Insider podcast is presented in 2026 by Citizens Bank.
This podcast is brought to you by Citizens Bank. Citizens Bank, serving South Central Indiana since 1931. Building strong communities one relationship at a time. Learn more at citizens-banking.com.
Community Health Network cares, offering primary and specialty care locations across the South Side. Find the care you need close to home at ecommunity.com/south. Community Health Network provides many advanced treatment options for our Southside neighbors. Feel confident in your care, from minimally invasive surgeries to specialized cardiac care. Learn more at ecommunity.com/south. Johnson County, you're invited to love your bank. Visit Centier Bank's Greenwood location, where community comes first, or learn more at centier.com. Today, we're joined by the Mayor of Franklin, Steve Barnett, someone known for a competitive spirit and for often closing his State of the City address by saying he will cautiously keep his foot on the gas. What some may not know is that before City Hall, he literally did. I'm your host, Angela Vanderstein, Vice President of Investor Development and Relations at Aspire Johnson County. Mayor Barnett, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Man, I'm just glad to be here. So it's pretty exciting to get away from the office a little bit and be able to chat.
So we need to come by and pull you out of the office just a little bit more.
Every day.
Every day. Okay.
Every day.
All right. Challenge accepted. So people know you have a competitive spirit, and you often end your State of the City, like we said earlier, by saying you'll keep your foot on the gas. You used to compete by literally keeping your foot on the gas. Tell us about that.
You know what? If you get me started on racing, we'll be here all day talking about racing. So, no, I was a late model dirt track racer for 42 years.
Wow.
Ran average over those 42 years, 50 races a year. So, yeah, we spent a lot of time at the racetrack, and I don't know if people realize I am a racer, and racers are a different mentality, and it is something that I look back on and really don't know how I was able to do 50 races a year and still have a family business that we own. But driving race cars, that's a big part of my life.
So you were racing and you had the family business as well.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to have a pipeline company working with my dad, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But in that way, I was able to get somebody to help take care of the car during the week, and I can take care of the business. And then during the weekends, like when I say weekends, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sundays, we was on the road racing, and then I would come back and somebody would work on my car and keep it up, and then I would be able to go out on the road again. So. But it was pretty tough. It was pretty tough on my family. Whenever I say that, my family was with me. We had a motorhome, and they all went with me. And my two girls are grown now. They were racetrack babies, and that's what our life was. We raced.
So you were pretty successful at it.
Well, I'd like to think I was.
Okay.
After 42 years, racing 50 races a year, won 200 main events and 28 championships, and was fortunate enough to make it into the Dirt Track Hall of Fame in 2018. And it just, whenever I started racing in 75, I never had dreams about doing that. I just had dreams about being successful at a racer. And it turned out pretty well for me.
What was your favorite win?
Well, actually, with 200 wins, they're all your favorite win. However, there is some memorable wins. Another thing that people don't know, most people don't, some do. Tony Stewart was a real good friend of mine, and Tony and I kept a dirt late model car for him, and he was my sponsor. He paid for the car. I kept it for him, and I would take it to the track, and I would run my car, and he would race his car. But one of the main funny times that we had is that Terre Haute Action Track. That's a pretty popular track here in Indiana. Tony's a hero here in Indiana, and he's leading the race. I'm running second, and we have this guy that builds our motor by the name of Glenn Nibel, And he's the one that got me hooked up with Tony and being friends. But Tony's leading. There's a late caution come out, and I'm running second, and I'm right there with him. And I'm thinking I'm a little bit faster than he is, but he had the groove. And you can't pass somebody if they're in the groove that you need to be in. So the caution comes out, and this mutual friend comes out on the racetrack, and they motion for Tony to pull down on the racetrack, and he was running the high side. Well, the high side was the fastest way. So I'm sitting here just smiling ear to ear inside my helmet because I'm thinking he's going to pull down to the inside. I'm going to the outside, and I'm driving by. And that's exactly what happened. I passed him before we ever got to the flag stand. And after the race was over, Tony gets out of the car, and, of course, he's pretty competitive as well, and he starts giving our mutual friend a bunch of crap like, whose side are you on here? So that was pretty cool. And then there's been other opportunities where Tony and I raced together, and he's won and I ran second, or vice versa. And there was a race in Ohio one time that Tony was leading the race, and there's about 3 laps to go, and I'm trying to pass him, and I'm running second, and he's bouncing the car off the wall, and it's my car, and I'm the one that fixes it. And I'm sitting there thinking, Tony's going to win this race, and it's in my car. I'm going to run second. I'm going to get all the money because he gave me all the money he won. Why would I try to pass him? So I just kind of sat there and ran second. Well, after the race, our pit crew, who could see that, which Tony couldn't because they didn't have radios or eyes in the back of his head, the pit crew come up and sit right in front of Tony and said, "Boss, why didn't you pass him? You was faster than he was." And my good friend Tony looks at me and said, "If you let me win, I'm going to bust you right in the mouth." So I said, "No, Tony, I didn't let you win. You won this." But we all know what happened there.
We all know what happened.
Yeah, so that was some good times I had with racing back in the day.
Yeah, that's great. Most of us don't know what it's like to drive full speed into a corner. What does that feel like?
If your car's handling real good and it gives you a security feel, I guess, that you can drive in a corner wide open and the car's going to turn. But if you got a car that's not handling very well and you don't exactly know it's going to turn where you want it to turn, that can get a little dicey. But you get used to that, and it's just something you get used to as a driver, and you don't really get a big rush out of that. I mean, you go out and try to do a job. I raced 42 years, and it was a business to me. It wasn't. I made money at it. I mean, I didn't go just to call it a hobby. It wasn't a hobby. You don't race 50 races a year and have to maintain the car and maintain Tony Stewart's car and call that a hobby. It was a job. So I feel like I had my whole life. I've been a multitasker and had 2 jobs at the time I raced.
That's a great point, because I feel like there's a lot of people who are not in roles like, racing or sports, entertainment, that don't see the behind the scenes business aspects are all of the preparation that goes into it. So you were out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but the rest of the week there was prep. There was things that either you were doing or things being done to the car.
Well, I feel like that's where I won most of my races was in the shop. Okay. And what I mean by that is while we're in the shop working on our car, we're thinking about the next race. We're not waiting to get to the racetrack and figure that out. So I felt like the preparation part of it, that is why we won so many races. When we got to the track, we were concentrating not on what we need to do to the car, like springs and shocks. We're watching the racetrack and seeing where the groove is and where do I need to be on the racetrack and make sure I'm making the right choices on the driving part of it.
Yeah, and I'm sure everybody who's been successful in that field, same thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. From the outside, racing looks like adrenaline speed, but I imagine there's a lot of discipline behind it. What did racing teach you about preparation?
Well, the discipline's that's a real good part to talk about. Whenever you hear me at the State of the City talk about keeping my foot on the gas, cautiously on the gas,
yes,
that is discipline. So what you do, like, you can't go win races and just put your foot on the gas and expect to keep it on the floor. You have to cautiously stay on the gas, work your foot a little bit, and sometimes you're off the gas and you go faster. So that is kind of like the preparation part we talked about and the discipline part. You got to discipline yourself when a guy pulls up beside you, a car pulls up beside of you, that you just don't mash the gas pedal to the floor. You got to be able to say, okay, this car's hooked up maybe a little bit better than I am, but you have to race them clean and not just stamp on the gas. And if you do that, that's when you spin your wheels. That's when you get passed up. And so you got to learn to discipline yourself. And the same thing with government projects that we do. It's the same thing.
How long did it really take you to understand that? And either in racing or with your role now about, that caution and pacing yourself.
Well, in racing, it took me it was 5 years before I ever won a race once I started racing. And that's another story on itself. My dad, whenever I was growing up, my dad always owned race cars and had drivers. So as a young age, I learned how to work on cars and learn the geometry of them and all that. So I learned that part of it working with my dad. And then after high school, my dad always told me, yeah, well, you help me work on the car, while you're in school. Once you get out of high school, you can drive the car. Well, I'm out of high school, and my dad's not letting me drive the car. So after a while, I had this real nice street car. It was a 70 Chevelle, and I went and sold that car, bought my very first race car, a trailer, and a truck. And the car wasn't very good at all. It was junk. But anyway, I can make it better. So I come home, and my dad, he sees all this, and he goes, "Where's your Chevelle?" And I said, "Well, Dad, I don't have that no more. This is my new ride. I'm going to race." And he looks at me and says, "You know something, son, you're dumber than I thought you were." And he just walked away. And then I raced on my own for 2 years. And then after my dad seen that I was serious, dedicated, he comes to me and says, "Okay, I'll sell all my stuff. You sell all your junk, and then we'll go buy us a new race car." And that was like 5 or 6 years after I started racing. And we went and got a new race car, and I started winning races after that. So it does take good equipment. It does take dedication, and you have to know geometry. And there's just a lot of things to racers that you have to know.
How important is the crew?
The crew is very important. Without the crew, you're not going to do too much. He also worked for my construction company, and then he was also working on my car. So at night, Brad would get off work. I would work on my car with him and with our other pit crew guy. And then Brad would go to the races with me, and my wife was a big part of it with being at the racetrack, keeping stats and keeping times and lap times and keeping me in the right, getting on the racetrack and in the lineups. But no, you have to have a crew and a good team to be successful at anything you do.
So thinking of your work as a racer with the crew, how has that translated to leading a team in your current role?
Well, I think the work ethic is there for me, and I think that our team at the city, the department leaders, and even the ones that are not department leaders that I get to interact with, I think they all see that I'm not afraid to jump in the trenches with them, and I think leaders need to do that, yes. Be able to get your hands dirty and be able to be a part of it. And you get good results whenever you just have a good team and you meet, and sometimes you pat people on the back, and sometimes you let them know where you think they may have failed a little bit. But what you do is after you tell somebody where they may have failed, you go right on to the next subject and move on. We're all good here. We're just trying to make sure we're all on the same team.
Yeah. So most racers don't end up in City Hall. Before you wound up in the mayor's office, what did your career path look like?
Well, that's a pretty good one there. I feel very fortunate. I tell people that I feel like I was one of those that lived the American dream. And what I mean by that is my parents moved here from Kentucky. I think everybody in Indiana come from Kentucky, it seems like. So my parents come up here from Kentucky with nothing. My dad went to work at Arvin's in Franklin, where they had the Arvin Automotive. He worked there for about 3 or 4 years and decided that he wasn't cut out to be a factory worker. So he went to work for a gentleman that had a pipeline company, and he worked for this guy for about 30 years. And then I'm trying to make a long story short. After those 30 years, my dad went into business. I was a senior in high school, and right out of high school, I went to work for him. I didn't go to college. I was going to go to Manchester and play football. And my dad, who had worked really hard all of his life, says, you can go to college and party for 4 years and then come back and go to work for me. And he goes, this company will be yours someday. And so I decided, okay, Dad, you're right. We'll try this. I went to work for my dad right out of high school. And there was 3 of us in this company that he had started. And I was the guy with the rake and the shovel and the jackhammers and all of that. And then as time went on, that was in 75. Then in 93, my dad, so we're going pretty fast here now. In 93, my dad decides he's going to retire, turns the company over to me. We have 20 people. And then, during that time, I've become knowing the business really well, bidding all the projects and kind of, trying to grow it. We had 20 people at the time he turned it over to me. And then that was in 93, 94 time frame. And then in 2006, there was a company come along by the name of Miller Pipeline, I think we've all heard of.
Yes.
And we had 120 employees, so we had grew our company a lot during that time frame. And they come to me wanting to buy, they said, we want to buy you, your people, and all your assets. And after about 9 months of negotiating and with Miller Pipeline, we sold our company. Well, along that time frame, as we had our company, we owned it for 35 years. I was racing. So that's where I'm saying I had the 2 jobs.
Yeah.
I would work on the pipeline, then we'd work on the race car stuff. And then after we sold the Miller Pipeline, I've become an area manager for them. And they told me they did not want me to change my life. They wanted me to keep racing. So I was able to keep doing what I wanted to do. And then the part I haven't talked about here, my last race was in 2016.
Okay.
And I was in October 1st, and I was in a very bad crash that broke my back, my collarbone, my nose, and concussion. So spent about a week in the hospital getting all fixed back up. And lo and behold, about 2 or 3 months after that, and I'm still recuperating, and I'm just getting released from the doctor to drive a streetcar. I get a call from my friend Joe McGinnis, who was mayor, that he was getting ready to take an NDOT position, and he said he wanted to tell me first because he figured I would want to, try to be the mayor. So that's how I got here. But that was kind of a trying moment there of not being able to, couldn't get out of the house. I mean, I couldn't drive or my streetcar or anything like that. And then 3 months later, you become the mayor of the city. I quit racing after that. It's probably not good that I went back and raced, but the doctor released me to go race. He released me to go test. He didn't release me to race, to go test. But at that point, that's when I decided, okay, you release me. Now I can tell people I didn't retire because I got hurt in a wreck. I can tell people I retired because I'm going to be the mayor. Yeah. So that's why I quit racing at that time. And just it was a good time, and just that's how I got here. So I worked my whole life, did 2 jobs, and now here we are. And I feel like we're very competitive here at the same thing. And I work at being the mayor every day as hard as I can. And it's just like racing. I mean, it's a work ethic that I think you grow up with, and you just stay with it and just do what you know you can do best.
Mayor Barnett, help our listeners understand what a mayor actually does. How would you describe your daily life? Well,
let's say a mayor is a problem solver. I mean, you'd be surprised. Again, you got to be a multitasker. Today, I was talking to the IURC about a grant that we've been awarded that we haven't received after it's been awarded in almost a year. I was talking to them about that. I was talking to our city engineer about tomorrow morning we scheduled to go for a ride around and look at some sidewalks that we want to replace in Franklin. And then we have another subject come up about this is today. I'm just talking today about a drainage situation with a pond that's over in a subdivision that we finally found out who has the ownership of it after 8 years. We have that. So, but just stuff all the time. I think we're setting up today, Tara here with me. She was setting up a meeting. She's chief of staff, by the way, and talk about teammates. I couldn't do stuff without Tara. But Tara set up a meeting for us to talk with our trash provider about the trash contract that's running out and that sort of stuff. So that's just today. So do we get free times. Well, I don't know that we ever get a free time, but we get things we like to do, like this.
Mm-hmm.
I really like to be here talking with you today. So
We're so glad to have you here.
this is my break. This is it.
All right. And then we're going to make it a regular occurrence to come in City Hall and just get you out for a little bit.
We can do that.
We can do that. Okay. What does the office have real influence over and what does it not?
Wow, I don't know that it has very much influence over anything. I'm sure it does. I mean, you can have. I know one thing it doesn't have influence over. It doesn't have influence over the railroad. It doesn't have influence over NDOT. Now you can sit down and talk with NDOT, but NDOT has their own way of doing things, and they're at the end of the day they're going to do it their way. And the reason I bring up NDOT, and we do have a good relationship. They're doing the US 31 project in Franklin right now.
Right.
We don't have a lot of control over that. So we do have control over how do we do snow plows? How do we keep our right-of-ways mowed? How do we try to fight cable pollution in our right-of-ways with people, the telecoms and the water companies, and how do we keep our right-of-ways cleaned and make you folks do it the right way, the standards that we want to see it at? You have influence on that. You don't really have influence on a lot of paving. I guess you can, but the way we do it in Franklin is we have a outside source come and rate the streets, and the bad streets get the pavement. That kind of takes me out of somebody saying, well, you paved your friends. We don't do that.
Okay.
That's things you stay away from. But stuff like that is what goes on every day in the mayor's office.
So you mentioned the NDOT project on 31 and just what you said about paving and sometimes people having misconceptions. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that residents have about the work you do?
Well, I think somebody can give me a call and say, hey, my neighbor over here's got, and this happens a lot, neighbors tell on neighbors. This neighbor over here's got a barking dog, or this neighbor over here's got a junk car parked over here. There is, or they don't like somebody's windows broke. I mean, there's stuff like that we just can't fix. People do have rights. Mm-hmm. And I do understand that, sometimes you want your neighbors to be a little bit better than they are, but there's things like that you don't have a whole lot of say in.
Okay.
Property rights, people do have a lot of property rights, and that's good. That's a good thing. So the legislators, we don't have a lot of control over the legislators. We can give them our opinions and kind of fight tooth and nail for what's right, and we just did that on House Bill 1001. And with SEA 1,
yes,
those are two big bills that I think that we didn't have a lot of control on, but we have a lot of fight in us. And the 1001 bill, I wish people would really pay attention to what legislators try to do on stuff like that. And like the 1001, trying to take away the cities and towns' ability to manage properties when builders want to come in and build on a piece of property, having the proper setbacks and the proper drainage and list the proper roads. The state had some big idea that we don't have that say anymore. So they tried to pass a bill to take all that away, and luckily it did fail. It failed because every mayor, every county commissioner in the state of Indiana was against this bill. And it wasn't really taken away. When we say taking away city rights, what we're talking about is taking away the people's rights that live in the city. We represent the city that the people live in, and we're trying to do the best thing for the people that live in our city, and then the legislators want to take it to a state level. That's not the proper thing. YouTube, okay?
Yes.
And you can see how many people watch, and you'll be lucky if you got 20 people in a town of 26,000 that's actually watching the meetings. Well, you got to watch these meetings to get the word out. I mean, you can't, we try to get the word out. I know our local newspaper does a pretty good job, but not a lot of people read the newspaper anymore. So, but it's really hard. And I've asked people before, we've had projects like that's been in the works. For an example, US 31 started in 2016, and there's been all kinds of conversation. And we get ready to go start the project, and you got people coming up and saying, well, who made these decisions? I never heard of this before. Why are we doing this? And it's been out there for 9 years. So that's tough.
Yeah. So with more channels for communication, I mean, you talked about the Facebook page and YouTube and such. Have you found that it's actually more difficult than it was when you started?
I don't know that it's more difficult. I do think I think it goes in spurts where people will catch on to something and then pay attention, and then they don't pay attention. But I want everybody to pay attention. I mean, I want to hear the dialogue and your opinion. You know, there's 26,000 people in our city. And I remember when I first become mayor, and I'm telling our department heads, we're in a meeting, and I'm saying, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this. And one of the department leaders said, Mayor, I just want you to know, you can't make everybody happy. And, you know, I didn't think a whole lot about it, so we went on to a couple other subjects, and it dawned on me. I said, I'm going to stop a minute, and we're going to back up. I said, you told me, I pointed at the person and said, you told me we can't make everybody happy. And I realized that. I said, but I know we can try. I said, so that's going to be my motto going forward. We're going to try to make everybody happy, knowing we can't, but you got to try.
Try.
That's right. And that's what we try to do.
So you're coming close to 10 years as mayor. Looking back, what are you most proud of accomplishing or tackling during your time?
You know, after 10 years, there's a lot there to be proud of, and we have done a lot. Not me, I'm talking about our city. Yep. and the crew, our team. We have done a lot over the last 9-10 years, and even before that, being on city council 8.5 years before that. But just the last 10 years, being able to start out by the interstate and go all the way to the hospital, you know, city limits to city limits there, and redo all of our downtown. That was big. And doing North Main Street, South Main Street, north and south corridors all the way through town. That was big. Finishing our truck route, getting our truck route and all the roundabouts that we built on the truck route to help with all that. And then you go to the quality of life stuff with trails and the amphitheater and just opening up this year, the Active Adult Center. I mean, there's so much stuff that you look out there. You can't just pick out what is your favorite. Of course, the quality of life stuff is good, but to me, coming from the infrastructure world, that's pretty exciting for me. Is I like living in Franklin my whole life and seeing what it used to be as a kid back in the late 60s, 70s when it was booming back then before Walmart come in and moved on 31 and all the downtown closed up. I've seen what it was, and now we've kind of brought that all back, and that's pretty exciting to see that. So it's just been a lot of good things, and we got some good stuff to go. We're working on right now a sports park. We bought 35 acres. Our redevelopment commission bought 35 acres, and we already had 5 acres that our small sports park was on. And we'll have 40 acres of ball diamonds and soccer fields, lacrosse and football and pickleball. So we're looking forward to maybe start at the end of this year or first of next year. But that'll be big, and get through 31. You know, that'll be another couple summers, and getting that behind us. And we're also working on this is a big deal. We kicked the can down the road for many years. We're doing about $50 million worth of work at our sewer plant. We've already got all the funding in place, and we still have the lowest sewer rates in Johnson County. So it's some stuff to be proud about. But so you can tell we're pretty happy with how the last 10 years has went. It should be. And we want to try to do this another time. So we'll be in the 27 election when that time comes.
Okay.
Anything that affects the employees, to me, those are tough decisions, because they're the most important asset that the city has. It's not all your streets. It's not all your quality of life stuff. It's your people that work for the city, that are dedicated to the citizens. And I see it every day. People that go out of their way to do stuff.
Let's wrap up with some rapid fire questions. All right, you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. Harder, winning a race or passing a city budget?
That's probably a tie.
Bigger adrenaline rush, green flag or election night?
I would say election night. When I get in a race car, I really don't get an adrenaline rush until maybe afterwards. But when you're in the race car, you're there to do the job. So you pull out on a racetrack and you're calm and you're cool, and you don't really get nervous, or I didn't. You just went and did the job. But election night, I think you're nervous the whole day. You're nervous that night, and looking forward to this next one in 2027. Yeah. Looking forward to that.
Good. Do you still miss racing?
I miss the competition. I do not miss all the work, but the competition part of it, the friends, seeing people that you over the years you get close with, and I miss that. I miss being with my friend Tony. We used to hook up once a month or something back in the racing days. Now we're down to we text each other quite a bit. And I seen him at the Legends golf course not too long ago. He calls me up and says, "Hey, we're going to be at the Legends." So I met him over there and talked a few minutes. But yeah, miss the friends. That's it. Yeah. Not the work.
Not the work.
Not the work.
And I think you answered already my next one. Are you still competitive?
I hope that I can, by my interview, that you can tell I'm still competitive. I want to be the best interviewer you've ever had.
All right. Yeah. All right. Okay. The bar is set. When you think about leadership, whether it's on the track, in business, or in public office, what does it ultimately come down to?
Wow. What does leadership come down to? I think leadership comes down to being able to stand with what you're saying and be able to back it up and be able to stand with the trenches with the people that you're trying to lead. In other words, back in my pipeline days, if I needed to get down in a ditch and help somebody dig some dirt, I did that. Today, if I need to go out with the street department and help them push snow or help them dig a trench there, I'm willing to do that. And I think that's what leadership is being able to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
I have a sign up in my office about leadership, and it says you weren't given a crown. And I keep it there purposely to remind myself that what you just said, you have to stay on the same level with your employees.
Absolutely. And I think that has been part of my success, has been at everything that I've ever tried to do is because of that.
You know, leadership does take many different forms. Sometimes it's on a dirt track, sometimes in business, and sometimes in City Hall. But with preparation, discipline, and team, you'll get the job done. So again, Mayor Barnett, thank you for joining us today and sharing both the story and the perspective behind the office. I want to again thank our sponsors for making this conversation possible. Inspire Johnson County's Business Insider podcast is presented by Citizens Bank. That is it for this episode of the Johnson County Business Insider. I'm your host, Angela Vanderstein, and join us next time.
This podcast is brought to you by Citizens Bank. Citizens Bank, serving South Central Indiana since 1931. Building strong communities one relationship at a time. Learn more at citizens-banking.com.